Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. Did you ever do one of those experiments where something suddenly happens in a room? Somebody bursts in and there's an interchange of conversation and the event ends, and then you're asked to describe what happened, describe what you saw. And the people that are describing what they saw each see that event a little bit differently. They see different facets of it. And sometimes they see it so differently that you couldn't even tell it was the same event as people describe the event. I don't know if you've ever done that or seen that on TV. Sometimes they'll do that on television to illustrate how eyewitnesses can see different things. Well, we're not dealing with an eyewitness when we deal with the gospel writer Luke, but he probably gets his information from Peter and possibly Mary as well. So he gets his information from eyewitnesses. But the interesting thing that we want to look at this week in Luke's account of the passion story of Jesus' death and crucifixion and death is what are the differences that Luke sees in that story, that Luke emphasizes in that story. And there are several. Luke, you remember, his occupation is a doctor. So you might expect, and you would be right in expecting, that Luke would focus a bit on the compassionate aspect of Christ and on some of those things that show his compassion for people. And that's exactly what Luke does. Some of the things that are unique to Luke, now if you've been following us on Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School, we've already been through the Passion story in a great deal of detail in Mark, some lesser detail in Matthew to look at Matthew's exploration or explanation of that Passion story. Now we're going to look at it from Luke's viewpoint, but we're going to highlight only those things that Luke picks up on that the other gospel writers don't. In chapter 22, verse 51 is the first line that's different in Luke's gospel, that's an addition from Luke's gospel. We're told in the other gospel accounts that when Jesus is arrested in the garden, Peter takes a sword or a dagger or a knife and cuts off the high priest's servant's ear. None of the other gospel accounts tell you that Jesus put it back on. Luke does. We have the line in verse 51, and he touched his ear and healed him. Luke, the physician, mentions that healing in the garden. The next thing that Luke does that's different, in verse 61 of chapter 22, when Peter has denied Jesus 3 times, we're told in verse 61, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Nobody else makes that statement. Only Luke does. Possibly because he's getting his information from Peter, and that would have been the thing that Peter remembered. That look from his Savior as he was denying his Savior would have been a powerful image in Peter's life. And the other possibility, or maybe both reasons, are that Luke wants to show Jesus' compassion for this poor sinner, Peter, as Peter denies his Savior. At any rate, that's a line that only Luke includes. Luke chapter 23, verses 27 to 31, Luke focuses on the women along the route as Jesus carries his cross to Calvary. None of the other gospel writers do that. Luke has a major focus on women throughout his account, and here it comes in chapter 23, verse 27. And there followed him a great multitude of people and of women who bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning to them, and notice his compassion on these women, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never gave suck. And they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it's dry? A proverb at the end there that probably means if an innocent man such as Jesus meets a fate like this, what will be the fate of the guilty city of Jerusalem? And in 70 AD, probably about 40 years later, Jerusalem is destroyed by the Romans. And there were probably a lot of people that said, mountains fall on us, as they watched the Romans march in and carry out a slaughter. Verse 34, Jesus is being put on the cross, and we have another line that's unique to Luke, the gospel writer Luke. As Jesus is being crucified, his first words from the cross, and only Luke records this, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Even in that instance, as he has nails in his hands and his feet and is being killed like a common criminal, Jesus has compassion on even those who are putting him on the cross. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Luke records that. Nobody else does. Verse 43 of chapter 23, we have the repentant thief. And we have Jesus' words to the repentant thief, again, compassion for that thief, as he says, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." Today you'll be with me in paradise. And again, illustrating the compassion that Jesus has and Luke's focus on a Christ who is compassionate. Finally, the last line that's unique to Luke is as Jesus dies. The last line that he utters in Luke's gospel is, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." And he breathes his last and he dies. Luke shows you the same Jesus as the other gospel writers, but he shows you a different facet of Jesus. And the facet he shows you is a Jesus who cares about those who put him on the cross, who cares about a repentant thief, who cares about women weeping along the way, who cares about a servant that came out to arrest him who doesn't have an ear, and he's going to put it back. Jesus cares. And Luke's message to you and to me is that he cares for you and me too.